All right, let's dive into something we all probably think about way more than we'd like to admit. Relationship red flags.
Oh, yeah.
The stuff that makes us wonder, should I stay or should I go?
Right. Am I overthinking this, or is this like a real problem?
We're dissecting an InStyle article. It's called 9 Relationship Red Flags You Should Never Ignore, according to experts.
Catchy title.
For sure. Our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to help you, dear listener, become a red flag ninja. Avoid those relationship landmines.
Because we've all missed a red flag or two, maybe a whole parade of them.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's like, how did I not see that coming?
Exactly. So we're not going to just list the 9 red flags. We want to group them thematically, kind of get into the psychology behind them, and really give you the tools to spot these things early on.
Because knowledge is power, especially in matters of the heart.
So true. So let's jump into the first cluster of red flags. These are the ones that revolve around, communication and emotional dynamic.
Okay, I'm with you.
The article starts with lack of communication, but let's be real, that's kind of broad.
Yeah, it's like, what does that actually look like day to day?
Right. What are some maybe subtler signs that communication is breaking down?
One thing the article mentions is feeling heard, not just listened to.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's one thing for your partner to, acknowledge your words, but do they actually get you? Do they understand what you're feeling?
It's about that deeper level of connection.
Exactly. And sometimes it's the nonverbal stuff that's even louder. Like if they constantly dismiss your feelings, or they shut down every time you try to have a serious conversation.
Oh, that's a good one.
It can be a sign they struggle with vulnerability.
Yeah.
Or they just avoid conflict at all costs.
So basically they're avoiding any real intimacy, even if it looks fine on the surface.
Right. It's all very surface level.
Which, ironically, can lead to way bigger blow-ups down the road.
Totally agree.
It's like that saying, if you keep everything bottled up, eventually you'll explode.
Yeah. Exactly. Speaking of explosions, our next red flag, extreme emotional reactions.
Oh, yeah.
The article talks about both extremes, explosive anger, and then the opposite, total emotional detachment.
That's interesting.
On the surface, those seem totally different, but what they share is an inability to regulate emotions.
Ah, I see.
Think of it like this. A healthy relationship needs balance, right? You express your feelings authentically, but you also manage them in a way that doesn't wreck the relationship.
So it's not about never getting angry or never being sad. It's about finding that healthy middle ground.
Exactly.
This next red flag, I feel gets a lot of attention, especially early on in a relationship, how your partner is with their friends and family.
Yes. Meeting the parents, the ultimate test.
Right. But I think it's deeper than just awkward family dinners.
For sure. We're not talking about the occasional disagreement. Everyone's family has its quirks. It's more about how your partner handles those relationships.
Yeah, even the tough ones.
Yeah. Do they show empathy, even when they disagree with their family? Can they set boundaries without getting all angry and resentful?
It's almost like you're getting a sneak peek into how they might handle conflict with you.
Exactly.
All right, let's bring it into the 21st century. The red flag of social media obsession.
Oh, this is a good one.
We're all guilty of scrolling a bit too much.
Absolutely.
But when does it become a relationship problem? I remember reading about this thing called phubbing, snubbing someone for your phone.
Oh, yeah. It's the digital version of ignoring your date to chat up someone else.
Exactly. And it can be just as hurtful, even if it's unintentional.
Right. It's about being present. If you're trying to have a conversation and your partner is glued to their phone,
that's rough.
It suggests their priorities might not be where you want them to be.
It's a sign of disengagement for sure.
Okay, ready for a tricky one?
Hit me with it.
Love bombing.
Ooh, that sounds nice at first.
Right. Who doesn't love grand gestures and tons of attention?
But the article calls it out as a manipulation tactic.
It's when someone comes on really strong, really fast, overwhelms you with affection and declarations of love.
Before you even really know them.
Exactly.
So it's not about genuine affection. It's more about creating a sense of obligation.
Yes. It can be hard to get out of that situation because you feel like you'd be rejecting this amazing, loving person.
But real love, healthy love, it takes time to build.
It's a slow burn, not an explosion.
I like that, a slow burn. Now, onto a classic. Controlling or jealous behavior.
Here we go.
And look, I think it's important to say a little jealousy is normal, right? We're human.
Totally normal.
It's how that jealousy manifests. That's the key.
So true.
When does it cross the line?
The article gives some clear examples, trying to control how you dress, who you hang out with, constantly accusing you of things without any real evidence, using jealousy to manipulate you into doing what they want.
Oof, that's heavy.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to isolate you from your support system, make you dependent on them. Not at all. It often comes from insecurity and a need for control.
Okay, let's talk about one that's maybe harder to spot. Gaslighting.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one.
It's a term that gets thrown around a lot,
Yeah.
but it's important to understand what it really means.
It's a form of manipulation, a very insidious one, where someone makes you question your own sanity.
Makes you doubt your own perception of reality.
Exactly. Think of that old movie Gaslight, where Ingrid Bergman's character is slowly being convinced she's going crazy.
Even though she's totally fine.
It's such a powerful example of how manipulative behavior can erode your sense of self.
In relationships, gaslighting can look like denying your reality, twisting your words, making you question your own memory.
It's about controlling the narrative.
Wow, that's scary, and probably really hard to recognize when you're in it.
Absolutely. That's why it's so crucial to trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
Don't ignore those red flags.
And talk to someone you trust, a friend, family member, therapist, because gaslighting thrives in secrecy and isolation.
So true. We've covered a lot in this first batch of red flags, from communication breakdowns to straight up manipulation.
Yeah, and it can be a lot to process, but awareness is the first step.
Absolutely. Up next, we'll dive into some even heavier stuff, red flags that signal potential danger. And we'll talk about how to protect yourself, how to prioritize your own safety and well-being.
Because that's what matters most. You deserve to be in a relationship that lifts you up, not tears you down.
100%. Stick with us. Okay, so we've talked about some red flags that, might seem a bit more subtle.
Yeah, those tricky ones.
But now things are about to get real.
Real talk.
We're diving into the red flags that should never, ever be ignored. The ones that, honestly, should make you run for the hills.
Because these aren't just like bumps in the road. These are serious warning signs.
Exactly. And the first one is, well, it kind of speaks for itself. Downright abusive behavior.
No excuses for this one.
Absolutely not. We're talking physical, emotional, verbal abuse. Any form of abuse is a hard no.
And it's important to remember it's often a pattern, not just a one-time thing.
Right. So even one instance should be a huge red flag.
It's a sign that things could escalate.
The article is super clear on this. Abuse is a deal breaker, period. And if you're experiencing this, please know you're not alone.
There are resources available to help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is a great place to start. Their number is 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 7233.
Please write that down, folks. Okay, another serious red flag, and this one can be tricky. Alcohol or substance abuse.
This is a tough one for sure.
Because look, we're not saying you can't enjoy a drink with your partner. It's about recognizing when it becomes a pattern.
When it starts to affect your partner's behavior, their responsibilities, when it impacts your well-being.
It's not about judging their choices, but it can create a dynamic that's just not healthy for either of you.
And it's important to remember that addiction is a disease. It's often linked to deeper emotional issues.
The article talks about approaching this topic with sensitivity and being willing to set clear boundaries.
It's not about ultimatums. It's about expressing your concerns and encouraging your partner to get help if they need it.
So we've tackled two really heavy red flags: abuse and substance abuse. Now let's shift gears a bit, back to those warning signs that might be less in your face.
Less obvious, maybe.
But can still do some serious damage to a relationship.
Like what?
Well, one that I think is often overlooked: isolating you from your support system.
Oh, that's a sneaky one.
Right. It's subtle, but powerful.
It's a form of control, for sure.
It can start small.
Discouraging you from seeing friends? Making negative comments about your family? Subtly planting seeds of doubt about the people you trust?
It's like they're trying to make themselves your only source of support.
Exactly. They want you to be dependent on them.
And that's dangerous, because it makes it harder to see the unhealthy patterns.
And even harder to break free from them.
So pay attention to any attempts to control your social life, to limit your contact with loved ones.
Your support system is crucial, especially in relationships.
Okay, another red flag that can be a bit tricky: constant need for reassurance.
Oh, yeah. Everyone needs reassurance sometimes, right?
Totally. But when is it too much?
It becomes a problem when it's excessive, when it's coming from a place of deep insecurity.
So it's not about feeling insecure here and there. It's a constant need for validation. Like they need you to constantly prop them up.
Exactly. And it can be really draining on the other person.
Because you end up feeling responsible for their emotional well-being.
And that's not your job.
It's a recipe for an unbalanced relationship. So we've talked about a range of red flags in this section, from the super serious ones to those that might be a bit more subtle.
Yeah, and it's important to remember, red flags don't always mean the relationship is doomed.
Right. Sometimes they're just signs that something needs to change.
But sometimes they're a sign that it's time to move on.
And in our next section, we'll talk about how to navigate those situations, from communicating your concerns to setting boundaries.
And ultimately, knowing when to walk away.
Okay, so we've uncovered all these red flags, but now what?
Right, like what do we actually do about them?
Exactly. Knowing about them is one thing, but actually dealing with them, that's the tough part.
It's like, okay, I see the warning signs, but how do I navigate this without, like, blowing everything up?
The article really emphasizes trusting your gut.
Oh yeah, that little voice inside.
That says, something's not right here.
But we often try to ignore it. Right.
Especially when you're like really into someone, you don't want to see the bad stuff.
We put on those rose-colored glasses.
Exactly. So how do we learn to trust that gut feeling? How do we know if it's just like a fleeting doubt or a real red flag?
I think it's about noticing patterns. Those feelings that keep coming back.
Like a nagging sense that something's off.
Yeah, ask yourself, have I felt this way in past relationships? Does this behavior align with my values?
And if you find yourself making excuses for your partner or trying to convince yourself it's not a big deal.
That's a sign you might be ignoring your gut.
Okay, so let's say you've identified a red flag. You're ready to address it. The article talks about communication. But those conversations can be so hard.
No, they can be terrifying.
Like, how do you bring up something sensitive without starting World War III?
Right. It's a delicate balance.
The article suggests using I statements to express your feelings without blaming your partner. Like, instead of saying, you're always late,
which immediately puts them on the defensive.
you could say, I feel hurt and disrespected when you don't show up on time.
It shifts the focus to your experience.
It's less accusatory.
And it opens the door for a more productive conversation.
It's about inviting dialogue, not starting an argument.
Exactly. And remember, it's a two-way street. You need to express yourself, but also really listen to your partner's perspective.
Without interrupting or getting defensive.
It's about understanding each other.
Finding solutions together. Now, what if you've had the conversation? You've both agreed to work on things, but the red flags keep popping up.
That's when boundaries become crucial.
Boundaries, yeah.
Healthy relationships need boundaries. It's about setting clear expectations and limits.
Like, this is what I need to feel safe and respected.
And this is where I draw the line.
And it's important to stick to those boundaries, to enforce them consistently.
Because if your partner keeps crossing those lines, it might be time to reconsider the relationship.
Which brings us to maybe the hardest part of all, knowing when to walk away.
Yeah, that's never easy.
But sometimes it's the healthiest choice for both of you.
You deserve to be in a relationship that brings you joy, not constant anxiety and stress.
A relationship built on respect, trust, shared values.
If those things aren't there, it might be time to move on.
And remember, walking away doesn't mean you failed. It means you're prioritizing your own well-being.
You're choosing yourself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into relationship red flags, we hope you've gained some valuable insights.
Remember, trust your gut. Communicate your needs, set those boundaries.
And never be afraid to walk away from a situation that's no longer serving you.
You deserve happiness.
We hope this deep dive has given you the tools and the confidence to create healthy and fulfilling relationships.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.